Danganronpa fan games have come in all shapes and sizes. You got your passion projects to full-on visual novels that feel like official sequels to the real games. But what if the best one wasn't a visual novel at all? What if it was a Roblox game? So before we actually get to our big question, there's something that we need to address that people get wrong all of the time. And I mean, that question is just as simple. What even is Danganronpa's genre? You know, most people call it a choice-based game because you talk to characters, you make decisions, and you go through trials. With that basic kind of way of thinking about it, it must be a choice-based game, right? Well, not exactly. You see, Danganronpa is a visual novel. Right? It's not a branching narrative, so no matter what choices you make, the same characters will die, the same truths will be revealed, and you're always going to end up with the same ending. And if you don't know what that means, basically, no matter what you do, Tsugami is still going to end up getting packed, Jay is still going to fall in love with Nagito, Berlizzi is still going to hate Kazuichi, and well, you know, that stuff is going to happen in DRV3. Compare that to games like, you know, Your Turn to Die, or even Detroit Become Human, or The Walking Dead, or literally any Telltale game ever. The thing is, in Danganronpa, your choices are basically an illusion. You can't really change the outcome, and the only thing that changes is how attached you get before, you know, you see these characters perish, bruh. Like, it really doesn't matter what you do. These characters are still gonna do the exact same thing. You can kind of argue this for a little bit for the choice games, especially the Telltale ones, because the endings are pretty similar with like slight changes, but overall, in comparison to Danganronpa, the endings are like always the same. Yeah, no matter what you do, be quiet. These endings are always gonna be the same. So that leads me into my next point. Why do we still care? You know, why do we, the players, still care about these characters, even though we know we can't save them? How does Spike Chunsoft get us to like these characters so much, despite us knowing there's nothing we can do about them? Because when we take a look at these other games, especially all these other choice-based games, we can see that most characters are saveable, or there's even an ending in a lot of these games where you can save almost every character, or even a true ending where you save everyone. But in Danganronpa's case, you know your character's gonna die. Or well, if it's your first time playing, you don't know. But if you've already played Danganronpa 1, then you know in Super Danganronpa 2 and in Danganronpa V3, someone is gonna die. To be honest, I think that's what makes Danganronpa special. Even though it's really linear and you could even say it's somewhat predictable, Spike Chunsoft still does a good job at getting you to care about these characters. You know people are gonna die. You know the game isn't gonna let you save them no matter what, and yet somehow you still get attached to everyone. They have 16 characters, 16 of them, and each one of them still feels distinct, flawed, or sympathetic in some way. And Danganronpa isn't exactly about the choices you make, but more like the connection to the story. Danganronpa makes us invest not because we can control the story, but because we can't. It's almost like the loss of control is that despair that's built on. Think about it like this. This is further proof when we take a look at a lot of these other choice-based games. You usually have tons of characters. Granted, I like using Minecraft Story Mode and Detroit Become Human because these both feature tons of characters who are always affected by the main character. In Minecraft Story Mode's case, you don't control multiple people and you only play as Jesse, but in Detroit Become Human, you have 3 main characters who all have their own lives and they're completely dependent on the choices that you make. I think Detroit Become Human has an interesting way of portraying death within it. If Connor repeatedly dies, he keeps coming back because he's just a machine, and the model is replaced with the previous one's memories. It's almost like death doesn't really matter to him and you could keep messing up. But for all the other characters, being Marcus and Kira, their death is permanent and you're gonna see the story continue. And essentially the point I'm trying to make to you is those choice-based games are a huge middle finger to your face, bro. Like, they want you to feel super bad about killing someone in a game. They want you to feel horrible about making a mistake, pretty much getting whoever you're working with killed. But in Danganronpa, you don't have a choice. No matter what you do, someone's still gonna die. And I guess that makes it feel less stressful. I think in Danganronpa's case, because you're less focused on trying to save everybody's lives, knowing that someone is going to die, you can spend more time just cherishing what you have. And I think that's a life lesson a lot of people overlook. A thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. And I think a lot of people who play Danganronpa miss that. The moments you get, even though they're going to die, are still important to you. That's why Hajime genuinely gets upset and depressed when you know who dies. You know who dies. It genuinely is a great way of writing a story. I mean, again, it's not a choice-based game, it's a visual novel, but even then, you still feel connected to each and every one of these characters in some type of way. And if you can't, well, you can at least credit for some of them. Like, for example, I wasn't the biggest Celeste fan, but I'm gonna tell you right now, bro, that voice actor, they have bills to be paid, because let me tell you, bro. So now that we've got those points out of the way, we can start moving towards our bigger question, which again is going to be, is Carnage the best Danganronpa fan game? But in order to answer that, we first need to answer, what counts as a Danganronpa fan game? So what exactly is it, it, right? Is it just the pink blood and, you know, some kind of bear mascot? No, not really. If you play Danganronpa fan games, which I actually haven't, then you would know. Most fan games follow a very similar formula. The obvious one, they're visual novels. They usually feature an original cast of 16 students. Well, not necessarily students, but just 16 characters. They include a Monokuma-like antagonist. They have killers, survivors, and endings, and all of those are predetermined, and of course, they all revolve around the same cycle of hope and despair. So basically, a fan game doesn't need to copy the gameplay, it just needs to capture the spirit of Danganronpa. It just needs to capture the spirit. So now it's finally time to talk about Carnage. Carnage is a multiplayer killing game on Roblox, which is inspired heavily by Danganronpa. Every round, players will take on their roles, being their ultimates, and then a host-like figure named Zebeth runs the show, basically acting as Carnage's Monokuma. Trials happen, people die, the story resets every time you join the lobby. And so, on paper, it just checks nearly every single Danganronpa box. Zebeth is your Monokuma, the endings are static, even if the true and alternate endings are basically two sides of the same coin, and well, the cast, that's you. Every player becomes part of the narrative, and this is where a lot of the beauty from Carnage just come from. Your Roblox avatars are your original characters. They're characters built to represent us in some type of way, and Carnage lets those original characters live and die in the world of a killing game. It's the perfect Danganronpa fantasy, just seeing yourself in the despair. Maybe perfect isn't the right word, because it's definitely unfinished, but it is what we want out of a Danganronpa game in terms of multiplayer capabilities. I mean, even people who don't have an original character still cosplay as someone, and then they play that character in the way that they would have. For example, my Roblox character is clearly just Izuru KAMUKURA, but what differentiates him a little bit is I have Chiaki's hairpin in my hair rather than carrying it around in my arms. It's just a way for me to differentiate myself in an interesting sense. It also makes me a little more recognizable to people in game when they do see me. And so what makes Carnage beautiful isn't that it just copies Danganronpa, it's that it transforms it. Danganronpa is a novel you read, but Carnage is a novel that you write together with the people that you play with. Every single match you do is its own story, and not because the code changes, it's because the people do. Whenever you play those good Carnage matches, and I'm talking about the ones that you remember day after day, because that has happened before, or even when you play with your friends, whenever you betray someone, they'll remember that. Every time you shoot your friend in the back, or choke them, or put a collar on them, they're gonna remember that. When you lose a friend mid-round, it hits harder because, I mean, what if you wanted to get the true ending together? And it's what Danganronpa always kind of tease. In Carnage's case, choice finally matters. Carnage turns despair into something that's living, unpredictable, and entirely human within Roblox. I think it's kind of funny talking about it in this way because it is just a Roblox game at the end of the day. But what's funny is that Carnage isn't necessarily a visual novel. In fact, it seems like it's both a visual novel and a choice-based game because the killers are not predetermined. Anybody can pick up a bat and kill someone. Anyone can get these guaranteed spawns and then use that to kill someone. You don't have to be a killer if you don't want to. You can choose to be a survivor. You can choose to be helpful or not. It's completely based on the decisions of the players. And that's why I think it's so good of a game. So even though you've got games like Project Eden's Garden that just look amazing just by looking only off the character designs, or even Super Danganronpa Another 2 that almost just seems like it should be a part of the original franchise, Carnage is just its own standalone game that features basically what everyone kind of wants, or more like silently what everyone wants. No one really talks about Danganronpa being a multiplayer game, but people do say jokes like, man, if I was in the world of Danganronpa, I would have survived that killing game, knowing full well we'd all be hiding in the corner of a classroom. So it's time to give my final verdict. Is Carnage the best Danganronpa fan game? And I'm gonna have to give a very big I think. A very big I think, yeah. But not because it's the most faithful, not because it has the best design ever, not because the developers are doing this really cool passion project, but just because it's the most alive and most interactive. Carnage just takes Danganronpa's foundation, its despair, its trust, betrayal, like literally every game mechanic, and just gives it to the players. It blurs the line between story and experience. You don't just watch despair unfold, you cause it. You are the root cause of that despair. You remember it. You feel it, brother. And the best part about it is you make the story. And I think that part in its own way is why it's the best Danganronpa fan game. Yeah, with these other Danganronpa fan games, they're gonna have cool cases where you might remember them for a long time, but in Carnage, you can make your own cases. And even though it doesn't have every single mechanic such as rebuttal showdown or even scrum debate, basically what we have so far is already enough. We want more, of course, but to say that Carnage isn't a good game despite having what it has right now, well, that's just a blatant lie. I think Carnage is a pretty good game, and honestly, that's why I would say it's up there in terms of the Danganronpa fan games. And you know, maybe that's the next step for Danganronpa. Who knows? Maybe one day Spike Chunsoft will take Carnage's approach and not really make a visual novel, but a shared experience, a world where everybody has their own ultimates and their own story. I mean, Carnage isn't really official, but it might just be the best reflection of what Danganronpa was always about. And honestly, let's just hope Spike Chunsoft doesn't actually do that. We all saw UDG. I really don't want a live action. I'm gonna be honest, I really don't want them to do this. Just leave it to Carnage, bro. Please, please, please.